podcast.
Between you and me.
Between you and me.
So today we're going to have a conversation. Actually, this conversation has probably been several weeks in the making.
Yep. Still don't know what we're talking about.
Still don't know what we're talking about. It's been several weeks in the making. It's been exacerbated. One of them words. It's been, I guess, brewing up a little more and more lately with everything that's going on in the state of affairs with Black Lives Matter and the protests and whatnot going on around the country. And so I want to dive in, and I named it Conservatism. Conservatism. Yeah, conservatism. And I think this whole conservatism thing, this whole conservative thing started when my son called me a conservative a couple of months ago.
I did.
And I owned up to it. But I guess I can say I owned up to it with a caveat.
Yeah.
And so we're going to talk about the caveat and how the caveat came about, I think. And so this is going to be an organic conversation that's going to hopefully take wings and fly somewhere. Mm-hmm. And so first I'm going to read you the definition. I looked up the definition of conservatism, and it says commitment to traditional values and ideas with opposition to change or innovation. And then it says the holding of political views that favor free enterprise, private ownership, and socially conservative ideas.
I can agree with that for you with the caveat as well.
Or the caveat?
So I can see what you're saying.
Okay. All right, cool.
A little bit.
So tell me what you think the caveat is.
The caveat?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess the initial thing is when speaking of conservative, it's conservative but not right-wing necessarily. Uh-huh. It's not a political conservatism.
Okay.
It's almost like adaptive conservatism.
Adaptive conservatism.
Adaptive.
I'm gonna start using that. I'm adaptive conservatism. Right. All right.
Because okay. I remember when I first said it, or we kind of had a conversation that ended up touching on it in a way a little bit. But my thing was that you didn't start off necessarily conservative, but life experience lessons like the pen is mightier than the sword.
Things
like that led you to see the conservative side of the world. And so I feel, and another thing I said, I feel like when we talk to each other in a way as of which to balance each other out. I said devil's advocate. You don't like using devil's advocate.
No, I'm not a devil's advocate at all.
But we speak in ways to balance out the viewpoints of each other. And so I guess just in a balancing out my whole new ways, I won't even say hyper liberal, but just free everybody's opinion, all that kind of thing. You balance that out with a level of conservatism of remembering the tea leaves.
All right. So yeah, so that's a good way of looking at it. That's a good way of looking at it. Because what I try to explain to him, because oftentimes when we're sitting down and we're having these deep conversations, and they happen often, he's explaining to me how he feels about something,
right.
And like he said, I mean, it is almost like a angel's advocate, because I'm not going to be the devil's advocate, but it's almost like trying to share a different perspective. And I think that's one positive thing about our conversations is that we can probably sit on either side of any argument and really make a case for it.
Right.
But what it really reminds me of is my youthful days. And sometimes when I'm sitting up talking to T, it's almost as if I'm talking to myself, man. And you know how you say, like, if I could go back and tell my 16-year-old self. And so a lot of times I guess it's coming from the perspective, I'm trying to go back and tell my 19-year-old self what's going down. And
I mean, that makes sense, especially with the balancing out. It probably comes from a different place from me when talking to you. But it's funny because I was in a class in my senior year. It was almost like a philosophy class.
Yep.
And a lot of times we talked about the ideas of like things being objective versus subjective. And a good friend of mine, his name is Jerry, but we always were on opposite sides. And so whenever we'd have a conversation in philosophy and be going back and forth, I would end it with, and that's why it's subjective. And he always ended with, and that's why it's objective. And so it was always like the back and forth. And so I'm a very strong, I guess I would say strongly believe in subjectivity and that everybody has their own belief. And that doesn't necessarily make it in, like, it doesn't necessarily make it naturally true or because of that. But I believe that everybody has a certain right to their own feeling, or everybody's viewpoint doesn't necessarily make it the truth for everybody. And so I think when I'm always talking from a more of a, I guess, a feeling perspective, like I understand the logic, but they might feel this and things like that. I think it still goes back to that kind of balancing out the world is subjective thing.
Right. And I can agree with that. So so say for instance, when we have conversations and our conversations center around college, because one of the podcasts I want to do, we want to be about college, and so I'm gonna wrap that part in here as well. And so we talk about college, and T knows little about how I was at college, right? But
I've only had glimpses.
Man. And that's only before I can snatch him out of the room when people I went to college with trying to spill the beans. But again, like when I was in college, I think I might have had a more liberal as far as anything goes mindset, using the term liberal. And as I've grown to have a more conservative, and not politically conservative, but a more, okay, let's relax mindset. As a matter of fact, there's a movie, and I don't think I've ever shown you this movie, but you probably heard this saying. It's called Colors with Ice-T. And when this movie came out, it was two cops. It was a big gang movie, but the two cops were actually having a conversation because the one cop was his first day on the job, and they were chasing somebody. And the dude just jumped out of the car and ran, and he just wanted to get everything done at one time. And so the cop sat him down at the end. I think Robert Duvall, I think it was the actor. Robert Duvall, he sat him down. I think that's who it was, and he was saying, bro, I mean, like it was two bulls sitting on the knoll, father bull and a son bull, and the son bull was like, Dad, look at all those heifers down there. Why don't we go down there and get one of them? And the daddy bull looked at him and said, son, why don't we walk down there and get them all? And so, like, that's been like one overriding thing, I guess, as I transitioned in my life from being a 19-year-old and how I thought about the world and wanted to take on the world, and like everything was like, I got an opinion on it. We talked about this morning, right? I got an opinion on it. I want to share my opinion on it, and my opinion. You need to look at my opinion. And now more so like, okay, it's not really about my opinion, though my opinion does count. I need to weigh my opinion based upon everybody else's opinion and move forward with a good footing.
Honestly, I find that kind of funny because naturally I'm more so like that, I would say, than just the my opinion got to be heard and all that. We even talked about that this morning.
We did talk about that as well.
I'm more of a naturally, everybody has the right to their own opinion, whether I necessarily believe, whether or not I necessarily agree with what you're saying. I mean, you have a right.
But you just don't participate in the conversation,
right? That was the kind of the caveat, the biggest thing we talked about this morning. I don't really participate in the conversation unless I get to a place where I'm just like, all right, well, this is too much. Now we got to talk about it. So
yeah, like his thing is like, yeah, you got an opinion and your situation is way over there, and I don't care about your situation, so I'm not even involved. Right. And so like even like again when I started talking about college, like with college, a lot of times T.O. say stuff. And not necessarily bad stuff or negative stuff about college, but he'll give me his take on like the administration at college, or what college does for the students, or what the grading policies, or all those kinds of things that, again, when I was in college, I had an argument for. I mean, I was against, or I had a strong opinion about as well, but I never took into account the really from the administrative perspective, trying to see things from the administrative perspective. And for me now, I guess it's been going on about 20 years. I've been doing work with historically black colleges and universities and minority institutions. I see the plight, and so I can see it from both sides. I see where we are doing really great things, and I also see where we missed the mark. And even so, I mean, I'm ashamed to say, but even so, I wasn't even requiring that T go to a HBCU. It was him who said, no, I'm going to.
Ashamed to say?
I am ashamed to say it, because I was like, dude, you don't need to go to no HBCU.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, he was like, no, I'm going. So, I mean, I'm glad he did.
I can see the point you were making there.
Yeah. And because honestly, that's the argument I have with him now. Because, like, man, look, dude, you asked for this. Because whenever he going through it, I'm like, dude, you asked for this. Like, it's not something that I didn't see was going to happen before you got there. You asked for it. But I can see, like, we had a conversation just the other day, and it was talking about what the administration's role is. And my thought was, or my part of the conversation was, I mean, really, the administration the president's office is not to care about you as the student. The president has somebody that he delegates that role to. The president's goal is to be the face of the university, to raise money for the university, to make sure that the funding and the infrastructure is there so that you can take the classes and be educated. Now, if you don't want to take advantage of taking the classes and to be educated, you dare to have a party, that's not his concern. And so when I was in college, I wouldn't have had that mindset. I would have thought, you know what?
I would want to take a second to say, in your defense.
In my defense, okay.
Just because, I don't know. I just wanted to talk more so about like what you were saying when you weren't necessarily pushing for me to go to HBCU. Oh. So it's not like you anti-HBCU.
Oh, no.
His thing was HBCUs can be very nurturing, things like that, underfunded sometimes. That's a bit all the time. All the time. And so his thing was like, if you go there, you're going to be dealing with that. And like with the nurturing, you're not necessarily the type of person that needs to be nurtured all the time. You need someone to make you get up and go, that type of thing. And so when he was talking HBCU, he was more so talking about me specifically. And now that I am there, he is like, well, you signed up for this. We talked about what it was going to be. And so, yeah, it's true. Yeah. I see what you were saying.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. So, yeah. So when again, moving back into the conservative thing, so that's when it comes to being conservative. I think my mentality is, I mean, it may look conservative. I don't know what you call it, conservative issue. What did you call it? I don't even remember what you called it.
Conservative with a caveat.
Conservative with a caveat. But yeah, the older I get, the more I value. I'm not going to say I value the opinion of everybody, which I probably should, but the more I am actually able to sit back and look at things from all perspectives and not necessarily articulate who's right or wrong, good or bad, but just what is. And so oftentimes we are, especially when we have a high opinion of something or when we have something that's invested in what's going on, we more so are on the this is what should be going on, and it ain't going on, and so it's wrong, and I'm like, yeah, that might be true. However, you got to look at the other side of, they don't have the money to do any of it. What are they going to? I
think that's probably where our biggest butting heads moments come from, because we're both really, we can see both sides of it type of people. But you're balancing it, you're balancing out my strong, I guess, opinion of a certain side, kind of makes it to a point where we're butting heads. And then I'm such a strong, well, just because there's truth to your side doesn't mean it's the complete thing. And so it becomes a continual back and forth. And I think what kind of came to the head was, especially as me being a college student, is our conversations when we're talking about like feeling versus authority. Like you have the right to your feeling, but still there's authority, and authority has authority. They have the final say so. So when even in your feeling, you should think about the fact that this is what is going on in authority, and this is authority thought process. And so I think just, even though I understand that, we have a back and forth when it comes to balancing each other out. Yeah. To a certain extent. I don't know if you agree with that.
No, I agree with that. I agree with that, and I think it's because, and it's funny because you mentioned earlier the whole thing I used to say about the pen is mightier than the sword, right, which is something my dad told me that I argued with him about incessantly when I was in college, but I found it to be true. And I think the thing is that because of how outspoken I was and how free thinking I was and how many lumps and bumps and bruises I took in the process, I've learned not to be sedated or subdued, but I've learned to actually.
There's another way to go about it.
There's another way of going about it. There's another way of going about it. It's a way of looking at everything. Because at the end of the day, I mean, you want to arrive. That's going to sound cliche, but you want to make sure that you inflict as little damage as possible. But you want to make sure that you don't get damaged in the process. Right. And so sometimes our fight, there's another way to win the fight.
It's not always bucking the system.
It's not always bucking the system. It's understanding the system
and finding your place within the system to make the change.
Finding your way within the system to make a change. As a matter of fact, and I will make because I was talking about even this whole Black Lives Matter movement, which I'm for 100%. Don't get it twisted. But I was on a conversation with some guys, and we were talking about all the legislation and stuff that needs to come out of this and all the changes that need to be made. I'm for that 100%. Don't let anything I say right now make you think differently. But the other thing I was saying, but there are some things that are already in place that we need to make sure that we take part of it as well. Mm-hmm. That is, i.e. voting. Like, you can not like the system, but guess what? The system is in place. And if you don't vote, you're not going to even get in a position to get inside of the system to make a difference. So don't get that twisted. The second thing is, like, there are legislative meetings, and we talked about as far as college campuses are concerned as well. Like, there are legislative meetings that we can go in and have a voice in. We can go in and have a presence in, but we don't do those things either. But as a young person, because I even remember, it's so funny, quick story. When I was a freshman class president at college, and as a freshman class president, my very first semester in school, there was a protest. It's funny. When I first got to college, there was a protest, and the students were walking out. And so I got elected a freshman class president during orientation week. Mm-hmm. And so the Sunday before classes started, when all the upperclassmen got back on campus, they were doing this huge protest over at the president's house. And I don't remember where I was, but I was not at the president's house, I'll tell you that. And I had people from the freshman class come and find me. Mm-hmm. And it's like, man, we're not represented over at the president's house. And I'm like, man, for real? Okay, whatever. And so I actually went over to the president's house and I participated in the protest. And even then, with my mindset, what I saw was like, man, we're going about this the wrong way. And not that I don't think the protest was warranted or justified, or it might even brought about some decent changes. The problem was we wasn't organized.
I was gonna say, like, when I think of that, it's not an argument of one versus the other. It's the argument is more so in unity across all fields.
Yep.
And so even with you're talking about, like, you're not against the protest now, I remember even I was a part of one of the conversations you were having, but it's like we have the people that are out protesting, and you're like, even like as we've become like the old heads now, things like that, and we're so happy that we have our younger generation, our younger people that are standing up to make sure that what they're said is heard, things like that, and now us being kind of past that area of out in the war zone is what they liken it to. Now we should be taking the time to us as old heads being in this place now getting together to talk about the legislation while they're out fighting the war side as well. So just being a unified front altogether. Right. So I see, the thing is we understand each other.
We do understand each other, but it's if you don't value what's considered a conservative viewpoint, or if you don't value a viewpoint that does not bring as much energy as a viewpoint that you come to the table with, a lot of times people look at you as being passive, look at you as being uninterested and uncaring. Right. It's just that for me, I've grown to a place, because I've been on that side. Right. I've grown to a place that I have to make sure that at the end of the day, everybody's moving forward. Mm-hmm. Everybody's moving forward. So it takes both sides. Yeah.
And you're being so strongly on the being active and moving so much in this side, make sure that you're also thinking about this other part as well.
Plugging holes, baby, plugging holes, because that's the thing. Because sometimes we move so fast, and I know because I've done it, we move so fast that we leave holes in it. And when we leave those holes, people actually they infiltrate the holes, and they yeah. Matter of fact, man, I want to talk about something else, and it's still maybe a conservative mindset, and I'm gonna leave it up to you. I'm gonna throw it out. I'm gonna leave it up to you as to whether to talk about it. Now, it's that whole the whole black on black crime thing.
Mm-hmm. What about it?
So I mean, well, I tell you about the conversation I had the other day with the young man who said something about now we need to start focusing on black crime.
Yeah.
And so
I mean, I know how I feel about it.
And again, I know how I feel about it. I just, again, from a conservative mindset, if you want to put it that way, I don't think this is the time for the argument.
I agree.
Okay. All right,
I
cool.
also agree.
So
I'm like, oh, well, you saying for another conversation or for right now?
No, for right now. I mean,
so I would say from my point of view, my thing is, yeah, it's a thing. But, like, it's the same thing as everything else is a thing. let me see. What's a better way of saying that? So like when you talk black on black crime, yeah, black on black crime is a thing. Crime is a thing in general, and it's not like we promote crime. We're not happy with crime as well, but we're talking about a battle that's going to take us coming together.
Right.
And so coming back in the midst of the battle of us, unity, us standing together for something, we don't need to be poking holes in ourselves.
There we go. Yeah.
And so that's the way I feel about it. But then I also feel like, I mean, black on black crime is just like white on white crime. The crime is in the midst of wherever you are. The situation is. And so when you have people together that are in community together,
right.
the crimes that could be. That's what the crime's going to be.
All right, so yeah, so we want to go. It's just, I was just touching on that because you feel the same way. So
I feel the same way.
It's just that I just feel like a conservative mindset is okay. Let's deal with the problem that we have at hand because we have momentum. Mm-hmm. And so let's be smart about what we're doing.
Let's not kill our momentum to have a different conversation.
Right. Let's not kill the momentum to have a different conversation. And let's be smart about what we're doing. So from my perspective, again, I want to talk about it from a conservative perspective. From like me, when I'm talking to my 19-year-old self, it's not that I don't see what you're saying, but I just don't see the place for the argument right now because it's not helping. And so oh, come on, for real. Yeah. Seriously, that's it. Yeah. And most of the time, that's what I'm saying to you. It's
I see what you're saying. I also see the place for the argument. I just think there needs to be balance.
See, you're going to make me say I got to accept what you're saying, even though I don't.
You don't accept what I'm saying?
No, I don't. Man, we're going to have to agree to disagree.
Yeah, whatever.
Only because I see what you're saying. But I guess
I could say a lot of times it's better to focus on the legislation before just creating an unbearable situation.
No, I'm not even talking from that perspective. I'm not going to disagree with you on that, but that's not even what I'm talking about. Because I actually, my mind went all the way back to your school. I mean, go back to school.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about. I was thinking about school too.
All right, yeah. So I guess what I'm saying is, I see what you're saying. You have a right to be emotional about it, but your emotion about it is not going to make a change. Right. Your emotion about it. Yeah. So okay, from that, and so and
that's what I was saying about legislation.
I guess I'll cap it off. I'll finish up with what my college experience when I finally showed up at the president's house. When I finally showed up at the president's house, the issue that we had was there was the freshman class president, me, then the sophomore, junior, senior class president, and the SGA president. Mm-hmm. And the problem was the arguments that were being had in the room did not benefit the sophomores or the freshmen. It was all the upperclassmen trying to get their way. And actually, in some cases to the detriment of the freshmen and the sophomores. Mm-hmm. And so my thing was, so now we just automatically signed on to an agenda without understanding what the real agenda was and understanding how we can actually move forward with everybody getting what they need out of it.
I think you have to agree on the change that you want before you're pressed about just any type of change, just upsetting the system.
Okay, yeah.
I would say.
So that's cool. So this is Clarence C. Brown with a conservative mindset or a conservative-ish mindset.
Clarence Brown III with a neutral mindset.
Yeah, whatever.
With a perceiving mindset.
With a perceiving mindset. Okay. All right. Bon podcast.
Between you and me.
All right. Holla.